In this video, I'm going to solve for cost identities based on missing information from other various cost identities. If you look at the spreadsheet along the top, you'll see quantity for Q, you'll see fixed cost as FC, variable costs as VC, total cost as TC, and then you'll see columns for average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost. So let's start by filling in the fixed cost column. If you look here at quantity 2, I can see that I'm given the information that the variable cost is 30 and the total cost is 80. We know from our identities that the total cost is the sum of fixed cost and variable cost. So if my variable cost is 30 and my total cost is 80, I know that my fixed cost has to be 50. And because my fixed costs are 50, I know that regardless of the quantity produced, I'm always going to have to pay $50. So I can fill in the rest of the column for fixed cost with 50, and it has to be the same all the way down. With this information, I can then go on to solve for variable costs. Because remember, variable cost is simply the difference between total cost and fixed cost. So if my total costs are 50 and my fixed costs are 50, I know that my variable costs here are 0. And then when I look at quantity Q is equal to 1, if I know my fixed cost is 50 and my variable cost is 10, the sum of these two, 50 and 10, will give me my total cost of 60. I've already got, for quantity 2, I've completed the fixed cost and variable cost and total cost. So I'm going to go down to quantity 3, where I see that I don't have enough information right now if I just look at fixed cost, variable cost, and total cost to be able to fill in these cells. I only know that the fixed cost is equal to 50, and so I'm going to go down to Q is equal to 5 and fill in this remaining cell here where the total cost is the sum of 50 plus 150 or 200. Now let me go back to this variable cost and total cost calculation for Q is equal to 3. Even though I don't know what my variable cost and total cost, I still have information in this spreadsheet to be able to solve for these two calculations. If I know that my average variable cost is equal to 20, and I know that my Q is equal to 3, I can calculate my variable cost, because average variable cost is equal to your total cost, your total variable cost divided by Q. So if I want to convert and solve for my average variable or my variable costs, I can simply multiply my average variable cost of 20. I multiply it times Q is equal to 3, and so I take 20 times 3, and I know that my variable cost is then 60. And now that I know that my variable cost is 60, I can sum 60 plus 50 and have my total cost as being 110. So I've completed the second and third and fourth columns here in this spreadsheet. So let's keep going down and solve for the average fixed cost. Well, my average fixed cost, you can see that here when Q is equal to 0, I can't solve for the average fixed cost with a Q of 0 because it's undefined. I can't have a 0 in my denominator. But then when I go down to Q is equal to 1, my average fixed cost is equal to 50 divided by 1, which is simply 50. And then when I go down and I take my average fixed cost for Q is equal to 2, I take 50 divided by 2, 25. And I continue all the way down to this next cell where I take 50 and divide it by 5, and I get an average fixed cost of 10. And I can do the same calculation for my average variable cost. For my average variable cost, I simply divide my total variable cost by the quantity Q. So for average variable cost at Q is equal to 2, I take 30 and divide it by 2, and I see that the average variable cost is now 15. And if I keep going down to Q is equal to 4, to calculate my average variable cost, I divide 100 by 4, and so the answer to 100 divided by 4 is 25. And when I want to calculate my average total cost is simply the total cost divided by Q. So if my total cost at Q is equal to 2 is equal to 80, then my average total cost is 80 divided by 2, or 40. And I go on down to the last place here where I see that the total cost is equal to 200 and my Q is equal to 5. So my average total cost here is 200 divided by 5, which is 40. And I have one more column remaining to complete. Remember the definition of marginal cost. The definition for marginal cost is the change in total cost for each additional Q. So as I increase my quantity by 1, how does my total cost change? So if I look at my total cost here, Q is equal to 1. I see my total cost is equal to 60. And when I produce one more unit of output, and I go from Q is equal to 1 to Q is equal to 2, my total costs increase from $60 to $80. And so the marginal cost is the difference between 80 and 60, which is equal to 20. And then when I look at Q is equal to 4, I look at what is the change in total cost as I go from a Q of 3 to a Q of 4. And I can see here that my total costs increase from 110 to 150. They increase by $40. So my marginal cost is now 40. I do the same exercise as I go from Q is equal to 4 to Q equal to 5. My total costs increase from 150 to 200, or $50. So given all this information, you should be comfortable with being able to solve for the various cost identities, giving enough information to solve the problem.